But first of all, I must congratulate our wonderful actresses, Phoebe Guffin and Abigail Porter, for their wonderful performances this evening. Amazing performances. Thank you, Phoebe and Abby, who have joined us in the audience. And I'd like to welcome our panel. And the subject we're discussing tonight is employment. And employment for deaf people in the 21st century. Has it improved? Is it worse than before? Is it better? So I have invited this illustrious panel. I had hoped for 5, but unfortunately one is unwell and so can't make it. And someone else, unfortunately, made a mistake with the dates, unfortunately. These things happen in life. So we're down to 3 lovely guests, and I'd like to welcome them. And also, just to let you know, we are live streaming this on YouTube and Facebook. Good evening, everybody. Neil, you're very far away. Come closer to me. Let me pull you, drag you in. Move closer. Look at the.
Oh, hello.
Move closer, everybody. Let's all be friends. So, if there is a question from the audience, I will re-sign it for any deaf people watching on a live stream. So, welcome to my panel. Please introduce yourselves. What's your name? Where do you come from? And what is your job? I'll start at the end.
Hello there, my name is Martin Glover. This is my sign name. And I'm a freelance architect based in London.
That brief, okay. Hello, am I talking to the camera? Am I talking to the audience? Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Kathy Heffernan, and I work as a TV director and producer, and I've also been a journalist in the media now for the last 15 years. Hi, everybody. My name is Paula Garfield. I'm the artistic director of Deafinitely Theatre and also co-founder of the company. As a chair of this panel, I don't know whether I'm going to get involved as well. Let's just wait and see.
Hello, my name is Neil, and Neil Fox Roberts is my full name. I've just recently got married, so I'm double-barreled. I've got a 3rd name now. I'm used to calling myself Neil Fox. Sorry, husband in the audience. So I've been an actor for the past 18 years, but I'm also an advice worker part-time.
Excellent. Thank you, Neil. So, the first question, and the question we're going to discuss tonight is, are there more opportunities in employment for deaf people compared to 30 years ago? What do you feel, panel? Do you agree? Yes or no? And you might wonder why I'm talking about employment, because obviously it's linked to the recent production that you've just seen of Contractions. You've seen this deaf manager, powerful woman. Have you seen that out in the real world? Are there deaf people in these management positions? Over to you, Martin.
It's a difficult question, really, because I've been in employment for 30 years and I've worked in various sectors. I first started working in the NHS before the time I was an architect. And that was within the public sector. Well, I'm talking 30 years ago here. And would I say, I always felt safe because there was very strict procedures to follow, and I did have access communicating with my hearing colleagues. But being a freelance architect now and having worked in a private firm too, when I started, the opportunities were there because I was young, maybe, and I was given these various opportunities. But I noticed the older I became, with the more experience I became, I noticed it started becoming a little bit tougher. Was it because people's attitudes changed? I don't know.
Do you think attitude changed for the better or for the worse, would you say?
I think looking back to when I was 20 and then reflecting on it now, it's harder now. I thought it was easier when I was 20.
Do you think it's harder for you because you've moved up and you've been promoted?
Well, I think I got the job very easily when I was 20 and I had a lot of support and a lot of encouragement. But looking at these 20-year-olds now, they seem to be struggling. I should have made myself clearer. The 20-year-olds I see now seem to be struggling.
I want to ask the audience, do you think that it's hard for young people to get into employment now than it was before? Comment from the audience. Yes, I would agree. but I think there's less jobs, it seems, and more competition for work. Whereas I think, it seems to be deaf people still have a lot of barriers to get employment. Jobs seem to be given to hearing people. So that was the comment from the audience. Let me move on to asking Kathy her view now. Do you think it's easier now than before to access employment? Kathy, my experience, Martin, is quite different to yours. I've been working for the last 15 years, and I do feel that things have improved now. When I look back on my own career, when I first started, work, I wasn't thinking of, the bigger picture. I was just thinking of me and of getting a job and being self-sufficient. And, I'm in the media world. And I think, looking back 15 years ago, I just really wanted a foot in the door to try and get into, the media world. The BBC programme See Here was there for deaf people, but it was more about on-screen talent, presenters, rather than off-screen talent. But I do feel that in the last 15 years, there's a lot more opportunities for deaf people behind the camera. There's more programmes being made in BSL as well, and I think more mainstream companies seem to be more open to employing deaf people, and I think it is that their attitudes have changed, and they've kind of thought now deaf people can direct, and they can do that, and I think there's a ripple effect. When they see other people doing it, then they feel more encouraged. I know that the BBC and Channel 4 have policies about employment for deaf and disabled people, and it would be good if other companies would follow suit and really just look at people's skills. I think we can see a lot of parallels with the gender gap, also with more diversity for people from different minorities as well. So we're seeing more on-screen and off-screen talent for deaf and disabled people. And I think it has changed. I think there's more opportunities. Paula, so you feel there's more opportunities for deaf people in the media now. I'm going to ask the audience, do you think there's more opportunities for young deaf people to get jobs in the media profession? Yes or no? Can I ask the audience, what do you feel?
Feedback from the audience. Yes, I think there's more accessibility, especially within social media. It's been very exposed on various social networks, and I think back then people were unsure of how to obtain information and how to even get work. And I've seen a transition, and I think thanks to social media there seems to be more opportunities. Thankfully, we have BSL BT as well, which has offered many opportunities, and also various media opportunities too. So I think social media has really had a positive impact.
And if I can add to that, two of my most exciting jobs I actually got via social media. I saw tweets and then followed that up and applied for jobs. And I think before it seemed to be a bit of a closed shop, whereas I think now you have to be really sort of savvy on social media. Thank you for that, Kathy. I'd now like to turn to Neil. And I know you now work for, is it Deaf Plus or RAD?
Deaf Plus.
Deaf Plus, thank you. And what is your role? Is an advice work about jobs, is it?
I do general support, and I'm an advice worker. So advice work and general support. I work 11 hours a week. I used to work at RAD, the Royal Association of the Deaf, but I moved to this new company, and I think there's a lot of people. I think looking back, can I mention where I used to work? I used to work for Marks and Spencer's for 9 years.
Were you in the same role for 9 years?
The same role.
Did you ever have any opportunity to get promotion?
No, and it was because I was deaf. I'm looking at the 1980s here. Of course, now it's a lot better. Well, I'm making that assumption. I don't know if that's the same. but there was no access to work fund at that time.
Did you ever have an annual appraisal? Did you have a one-to-one with the manager?
I only had one.
In 9 years?
In 9 years.
Aren't you supposed to have an annual appraisal?
No, nothing.
You did not have that?
It was bad.
Terrible. What about supervisions? Did you have supervisions?
Occasionally, not that often. I think I didn't even have an interpreter for my training sessions. And at the end, they'd say, for example, they might be talking about checks, and I'd inquire, and they'd say, oh, we're just talking about checks, don't worry. And I became very submissive and just accepted it. And you might remember CFAX. I mean, I'm repeating myself here. Do you remember CFAX?
CFAX.
Oh, yes. There was a deaf course on there, University of Reading.
CFAX. Oh, that was such... Oh, back in the day, on analogue television, there was you pushed buttons and words came out.
It wasn't the 70s. You're making me feel old. It was the 80s, Martin's saying.
Oh, I remember there used to be job adverts on CFAX, didn't they? What was the page?
Yes, don't need to shout.
Oh,
do you remember?
No need to shout. Oh, that's right. I remember that too.
Yes, I saw that, and I saw a deaf acting course in Reading, and I was itching to do something different. I bought a house while I was working at Marks and Spencer's, and I felt trapped, and I wanted to break out of that. And I was aware, yes, of course I had deaf friends, but I was aware that I needed to spread my wings. So obviously I met you, and I decided to jump. And then I realised that actually I wasn't fit enough to be an actor. Look at this paunch.
Oh, don't say that.
But I started volunteering at the Royal Association of the Deaf, and I thought, how wonderful. I'm working with staff members that are deaf and hearing, of course, but it was mainstream and it was wonderful. And it's very rare to see that, and it's a shame. And I think we need to establish more companies like this.
Thank you for that, Neil. But can I just widen this out to the audience? Does anyone have experience working in a situation where you've had no annual appraisal, no regular supervisions, no training opportunities offered to you, no interpreters perhaps? Can I ask for a hand up who's had that experience, perhaps in the same role for 9 or 10 years? And I can say I was in that role prior to Definitely, so I can be one of those number. I think, yes, we've got 2 or 3 in the audience putting their hands up. Yep, 3. Any more? 4.
Audience is saying, well, I used to regularly get an appraisal, but not this year for some reason.
Just to repeat that, that person's had, they said they've got a new job for the last year. They've had no appraisal and no opportunities to climb the ladder. And I think appraisals and regular supervision is vital. It's important for you to sort of share your views, to really talk about if you're not happy or areas that you need training in to improve your skills. I never had that until I sort of started Definitely Theatre, and they were like, you have to have an annual appraisal. I'm like, what's an appraisal? And I was like, and I have to appraise other employees, and oh gosh, it was a huge learning curve for me, coming into Definitely Theatre and finding the right way of doing things. Comment from the audience.
I think there's a number of problems. There's a lot of projects that support the deaf, but a lot of deaf people are naive of their rights and speaking up and actually saying, oh, I need an appraisal, and they find themselves 2 years later without an appraisal. So I believe a lot of... Sorry, I'm struggling to see. Can you
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just oppressed callers repeating the question, saying that they don't understand the rights. I'm just thinking about maybe I should bring our contributions down onto the floor to make it easier for the rest of our audience members to see. But just to summarise that, I think I've heard a lot of stories that there are deaf people in those same, jobs, and that perhaps a hearing member of staff comes in, same level. 6 months later, that hearing person gets promoted. Oh, bye, see you later. Deaf person's in the same role, a new hearing person comes in a few months later. Oh, off they go, they get promoted again. Whereas the deaf person gets overlooked. And let's talk about the 21st century, is what we're talking about now. But Kathy, you wanted to say something. I worked at the Guardian newspaper for 5 years, and some of my manager didn't like doing appraisals, and I really had to pester them because it wasn't kind of a regular part of the culture in journalism, to be fair. It wasn't that you sort of climbed the ladder that way. It was more about networking, or who you knew, or who you spoke to, or what stories you'd written. But I sort of
And
said...
being assertive, Paul is saying?
Absolutely. I said, you know, I want an appraisal. I want to know how I'm doing. I had to tell my manager how to appraise me. And I think it's not just, you know, just for deaf people. I think it can be also the workplace culture as well that we need to be aware of.
It's very interesting. I think being self-employed now and working as a freelancer, I don't have anyone to appraise me, nor do I appraise anyone else. But because I am a qualified architect, I am responsible for my own continuous professional development and appraising myself. I have a responsibility to do that myself. And I think if I was comparing it to the past and now, I think it's a lot better now because we have access to work fund, for example, to allow us to have interpreters, but also there's more and more interpreters becoming available to us, where if I was qualified back then, I probably wouldn't have had that access. So there's more opportunities now.
I'm aware of the time. Question to the audience. Do you think it's common that, you know, hearing people in employment encourage, support, cultivate deaf people's promotion opportunities, or do you feel that's not the norm? Comment from the audience? No, I haven't seen that. It is most people that, hearing people that climb the ladder, and deaf people sort of, you know, just stay in the positions where they are.
Sorry, I keep pulling away from you. I don't know why. I think it's the media as well. I think hearing people need to see what deaf people are capable of doing. There is a deaf manager I know, but they were filmed because, and we exposed that person, and we showed that this you need to face out. We showed that this deaf person was a manager.
Absolutely, we need more exposures. That deaf people are in management roles and can manage. Okay, so you've just watched Fifi acting as the most awful manager in the world, but you've seen her as a deaf manager. Has that inspired you to think, oh, I can be a manager too? You know, has anyone got a dream like that in the audience? Have we inspired people tonight? Comment from the audience, which I can't really... the performance was amazing this evening. And this person wants to select some of the manager's skills and take them into their own workplace. So she's become a bit of a role model. So well done, Fifi. You should charge this audience member, obviously, for the management skills lecture you've had this evening. But no, it's leadership. I think leadership is very important. Leadership and management skills are very important. They need to be trained and cultivated. Leadership, absolutely. Another comment from the audience. Talking about human resources and HR management, and that's obviously a very important department, avenue of support. Just repeating the question, sometimes it is that deaf people are perceived as can't doing things and are given, you know, the lowest possible opportunities. And if they want to apply, you know, for a really sort of, you know, good job, they don't have the experience to be able to apply for a job. It's that whole catch-22 thing, isn't it? You know, you don't have the experience, you can't apply for the job, but how do you get a job without getting the experience first? So, yes.
My memory's not very good, Paula. I can't remember what I was going to say.
Right, what I was going to say is, do you feel you'd like to be a manager, Neil?
Well, I believe I have the skills, and I feel like I could develop them further. But I don't have the opportunity to do that. I've definitely got skills.
But how could you break through that and become a manager?
More training. That would allow us to become more confident. But thanks to access to work and having the access to interpreters to make phone calls and send letters on my behalf and adjust my English, for example, that gives me more confidence. When I'm writing an email, the interpreter will adjust the English, so it looks more professional. It empowers the deaf community and the deaf people themselves.
My final question for this session. Do you think deaf people prefer working in a deaf-friendly environment, or do you think, we should go out into the mainstream, go out into these companies with no experience or no deaf awareness? Do you have what do you think, panel members? Martin first.
I think my opinion is, having worked with a deaf organisation for 5 years, and then having worked with hearings for 20, if I'm honest, I prefer working with deaf. The reason why, I think, is because there's a fluidity in conversation, and I'm happy to go to work knowing that I can easily communicate with someone and do my job efficiently, where I struggle with hearing people. I think that's one of the reasons I decided to go freelance as an architect. Last year, I just finished a contract, and I was asked if I wanted to stay on full time, and I thought, I don't think I would like to. I did end up doing 3 days a week, and I felt wonderful and fresh on a Monday morning, and of course I had access to interpreters, but come Tuesday I was a bit in the middle, and by Wednesday I just had enough. I was exhausted. And then by Thursday, Friday and the weekend, I'd feel wonderful again. I felt restored, and I'd be back on Monday, and the cycle would repeat itself. And I realised I can't do full-time work with hearing people, and actually it's better with deaf.
That's a really interesting. I think Fifi wanted to add something, but I'll just ask Kathy first. Kathy, I am freelance, and one thing I like about being freelance is the variety of workplaces that I can work in. I have worked in the mainstream media with hearing people, and I feel that there are amazing opportunities there to learn and develop. If I work on programs with other deaf people that are in BSL, the programs we are making programs for deaf people. We are making programs in BSL, and really I want kind of to broaden my experience, to be able to work anywhere, to work in mainstream programs as well as working for deaf programs, so you get kind of that more variety of genres if you worked more in the mainstream, and that more exposure to that. But I appreciate it is challenging, incredibly challenging. And before I was an investigative journalist, and I absolutely loved it, but it was so hard to get opportunities because the nature of investigative journalism is, phone calls. You need to work on a Monday, and it's Friday afternoon. Go to Leeds for 2 weeks, with 24 hours notice. I'm like, I need to find an interpreter to do that, to go with me, and and I think if I was absolutely 150% committed and I could do it, but it's no fun. And I want work to be fun as well as, good. And it was so stressful trying to book interpreters and finding them available on certain dates. So I really opened up what I did, I worked then on TV documentaries as an investigative journalist, and I'm now currently working on a couple of programs for deaf people. And prior to that, I worked in development for a mainstream TV company, but it was quite a small independent company, and I worked with 2 guys who were hearing, who were lovely, and it was really easy to communicate with them, and I learnt so much from them because they'd worked in the media for such a long time, and it was really, they learned from me, I learned from them. So I think being freelance has those benefits that you can actually sort of dip in and out of working with hearing people and also working with deaf people as well. Let's bring in Fifi.
Can you see me on the camera, Fifi? I left school when I was 19, and I got a job in a massive hearing company, GEC, a General Electrical company. And I left being very oral, and I spoke a lot, and I got a lot of praise for that. And I worked there for about 8 years. I did sadly become made redundant. And after that, I'm not drunk, I promise, I started working for Remark, which is a deaf company, and everyone was signing. And I was there for 15 years. And in reflection, could I work at GC again? Absolutely not. That hearing company was all very formal. There was like, oh, hello, how are you? And that was it. It's a lot of small talk. But at Remark, I had opportunities to express myself and get involved in conversation. And I expressed more of myself and my personality in that deaf company. And I think it comes down to communication and access and language.
Thank you, Fifi. I'd just like to bring Neil into this discussion. So I know you've worked with hearing people, and you've also now worked in a deaf organisation. Maybe you have a similar experience to the others, but I'd like to ask how you feel.
I fit in now. I fit in. I think, of course, there are hearing people with signing abilities and British Sign Language abilities. And, of course, that's your view, Fifi. But I think sometimes a lot of hearing people, if they've had exposure to that community, they pass it on and it spreads. And I think that's very important. If you just stay in your own deaf communities, hearing people don't learn. And surely it's about spreading the word.
And some people are agreeing with Neil's comment there in the audience. So thank you for that. Any final comments before we wrap up this discussion? There is a question from the audience.
Someone from the audience. From my experience, having worked with deaf organisations all my life, in various deaf organisations, and I've never once worked in a hearing organisation, and I think that's because I was nervous. I felt like I'd be isolated and I was quite fearful, if I'm honest, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've decided to stay in deaf specific organisations.
Thank you for that. Okay, another comment from Ahmed Madawi again.
There we go.
I'm not going to leap over the furniture, Ahmed's saying, but for the last 11 years I worked in a deaf organisation. It was amazing, having colleagues who sign, really sort of getting access to training, access to interpreters, and then if things ever happened, unfortunately what did happen is that another company bought out our contract. And it was like, oh shit, this is going to happen. This, company's going to take over and it's going to be run by hearing people. That's what happened to us. And they took over this company. And it was very difficult. It was incredibly difficult. But I think I was quite lucky. I'm quite an assertive guy. So I was able to sort of, assert my rights, influence these hearing people as well. And, I think it is about showing hearing people we can do things. We are assertive people. We have the skills. And after a year or two, they saw that confidence in us. So I think it really does depend on the environment. You can't say all are positive and all are negative. But it's about having the assertiveness to be able to sort of show what deaf people can do. No, obviously, some deaf people do oppress their hearing staff, as we saw in this evening's production. Very funny. I'm sure that's not quite you. There's one more person. Ben Fletcher would like to make a comment.
I just want to tell you who my worst manager was, or experience was. This person gave me a lot of stress. It was a faceless person. And it was Access to Work, the government organisation. It does have a face now, and it's the manager, Fifi Garfield.
I'm watching you.
They are on par, Access to Work and the manager. That personality is exactly the same. I take that as a compliment, Fifi saying.
Wow. Fifi Garfield, the new face of Access to Work. Paula, thank you so much for your discussion. Thank you so much, our panel members. Thank you, audience, for staying for that. That was a really interesting session. I hope you will carry on and continue this discussion about how we can improve opportunities for deaf people in the workplace. I want to see more deaf managers. That's what we want to see, just like Miss Garfield this evening. Thank you so much.
Applause from the
Everybody,
audience.
have a lovely evening. Good night.
Yours just wants to rest. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Hello, Dawn. You doing?
Amazing.
Come on, Natalia.